Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about migrating an old Ceph cluster into the new managed way of CephAdmin. I'm excited to tell you that I partnered up with Code Combat to bring your kid a learning opportunity. Back in my day, there were no one that could tutor me. I knew more than the teachers and I had to put in the work because there were no other option. Unlock your child's coding potential with Code Combat's live online classes. The classes are led by experts who make learning an exciting and rewarding experience. With their help, your child will work through coding challenges and feel proud of their accomplishments. Personal attention and a structured curriculum will help your child become a confident coder. I always said that I hope that you learned something today, and now your kid can. Follow the link in the description and enter the promo code EXPLORER10 at checkout for a 10% discount, and all subscriptions have a 30-day money-back guarantee. And I would say that for a production cluster, I believe still that this is a little bit too early to actually run this. You might do it if you have a very large cluster and need some kind of management because it makes things much easier. But I ran into a bunch of different rough edges that is not really that good for a production environment. So if we switch over to my screen here, we can see that I have a test cluster here. And this is something that I suggest you do as well. If you want to migrate a production environment, create a test cluster that is very similar to the production environment so you can run a test run before you actually do the real production migration. The problem I ran into was that I tried to do this with an older version of Debian, Buster, and it had already Docker installed, and when I tried to run it through, it failed. But it didn't fail on the first part where they prepare the host and check that you have all prerequisites. It said that everything was fine, this should be able to merge. I merged the managers and then nothing started up again and I had a broken cluster. That's not something that you want. You want to be able to migrate without that kind of problem. Of course, you could go back and start a new manager with the same name and then roll back if you get into that problem. But I think it's more hassle than it's worth. So, and what I do also is delete your old configuration. So the old manager is just gone. So you need to set up a new one if you get into that problem. So it's a lot of hassle if you end up in that situation. What I have done now is upgraded to Bullseye, which has Podman installed by default, which makes the process smoother, but I'm still not sure that it will work every time. So we will run through it here. Hopefully it will go smoothly, and I will show you how to migrate and how to upgrade a cluster to the latest version and talk about some difficulties. So this is my test cluster here. You see that I have some data in it, about 4 gigabytes. It's some Debian images that I put into a file system. So we have a bunch of data servers, we have some monitors, OSDs and so on. So 3 hosts with a bunch of services. So let's switch over to my console here. So this is host 3, we have host 1 and host 2. So let's clean that out. So first off, each server or each host needs to have curl. So let's install that with, and in this case, we also want to actually switch over to be root for doing this. A lot of things is much easier if you have root access on the device. So let's install curl on all these devices. That is to fetch the actual binary that we want to use later on. And I want to fetch the Pacific version of this binary. So the CephAdmin Pacific is what I will fetch here on all these. Like that. So now I have all of them fetched, and I need to make them runnable as well. So let's cmod all those. And then I want to install the repository for release Pacific. So this should probably already be done if you have a Pacific running already. So the cluster I have here is a Pacific cluster. It's the same version. So I don't switch from one version to another version. And it's fully upgraded as well. So the latest Pacific, that could also be a good thing to actually upgrade your cluster before you start the migration process to ensure the best result. And then we do a CephAdmin install. So we will install the actual binary so that it will be available locally. So if I run this command which here, it will tell me that I have the binary available in USR sbin. Then I want to prepare this host. And if we run that, you see that it's verifying. You have either Podman or Docker installed, checks that you have LVM2, that time synchronization is in place. So it pretty much has an NTP server, and that Podman with which version it is, if that is good enough, if you have system control and LVL create and so on, and that the system service is, the time system sync service is enabled and running. So it does a bunch of checks, but as I said, these are not all that full, so you can't really be sure that it actually works with this. Then I can do a CephAdmin ls to see which kind of services is available here. So I see that I have a host version here and so on. So these are the old legacy style services that are installed here. And for each of these CephAdmin services, you can add image and then what image you actually want to run each of these services in. But as I installed it with Pacific, it means that it will fetch the latest Pacific image, and that works best. I tried to actually specify exactly which image I wanted to download, and it failed every time I tried to do that. So that feature is not ready for prime time. Just run it as just install it and run the default latest image for that specific installation. So now I want to assimilate the configuration. This is to copy that into the managed service, and we have the same configuration on all these services. But if you have different configuration on different hosts, then you need to actually assimilate all of them so you have all the configuration in one place. So that's another thing. You can't really have different configuration on different hosts. So then I want to adopt my monitor. So I run this command here, ceph adopt style legacy name monitor n1. So this is my node 1. I am on the node 1. If I run that, it will fetch this image from Cray.io Ceph version 16. There is also a bunch of images on Docker.io, and there are other places that host those as well. But this is the default image that it pulls down here. It takes a while to pull down the image the first time, so the first service that you adopt will take a little longer. Depending on your internet service and so on, it may take longer or shorter. So now it's done. You see here that it has stopped the old systemd unit, it has disabled the old one, it has moved all the data, it has CO'd the content and moving the logs and created new units. So now the new monitor is running. You see that we still have all the things running here. If we reload this, we should still have monitors in quorum. So if you have assimilated a monitor specifically, look in here and see that you actually have it assimilated and in quorum before you go on to the next monitor. So be safe there. If we look at the host here, we see that we have these kind of services and all of them are running, and we see that the monitor is running here as well. We haven't started the orchestrator yet, so we don't see anything here. But everything seems to be working just fine. So let's adopt the other two monitors. So I will start the adoption of monitor 2 and monitor 3. And I get back to you when they are done. now I have adopted both monitors. They are still in quorum. And if you're doing this on a production environment, do one service at a time. Don't do all of them as I did there, because you want it to be safe when you actually switch over. So what we do now is also adopting the managers, of course. And I have 3 of those as well. These are less important to run one at a time, because managers are just units that handles the web GUI and runs different services, and you only have one of them up and running at one time. So it doesn't really matter if you switch all of them down and then turn them up again. So now all the managers are also adopted. Now we can actually switch over to using this CephAdm orchestration. So let's enable that module, and we will set the orchestration backend to CephAdm. When we have done that, we should be able to see, if we can reload here, we can see here that we have 12 stray daemons and 3 stray hosts that is not part of the CephAdm. If we look at hosts here, we still don't see any information here because the hosts haven't been adopted into this here, and we can't see anything in the services because we haven't really set up the hosts yet. So that is the next part we want to do. And this is a little bit fiddly as well on a Debian service, because a Debian is of course a little bit more secure than other systems, which is really good. But you need to do a few steps more. So first here, we want to generate a key. And then we want to get that specific public key and type it out to our current directory here. So here we have one RSA key that we want to put on each host. And we want to SSH copy them over. But as the hosts are secure, we can't do that. So what we want to do is go into SSH configuration, SSHD configuration, and in here we want to look for permit, and it's pretty close here. And here we say that we want to permit root login, yes, for this service. And then we do the same for the other 2. And when you have done that, you can restart your system service, systemctl, restart SSH, and SSHD. So we restart that service. Now I can copy this over. So this key I copy over to the same service. And when I've done that, and I need to add the root password, I then go back into my SSH config, very important. I comment this row out and restart that SSHD service again, because you don't want this root login to be enabled on your system environment. That is not a secure thing to do. So if you have a system, and I need to copy this from the same server, of course. So from H1, I can copy these over, and then go back here, and then go in and disable the root login again. So now you have a key that Ceph can use to log into your system and do things, but you don't want to enable this generally for everyone to do, because it's not safe to have root login on the service. So that's why Debian has turned it off, because you shouldn't do that. But for this to work, we need to temporarily enable that feature and then disable it right after, because we don't want anyone else to get access to your systems. So now we have put the keys on all the hosts. So in our SSH authorized keys, this key should be enabled there. What we can do now is go into any host and type ceph org host add, and then the name of the host and the IP of the host. So that is adding the actual host to the orchestration. So we can add the other two as well. And now if we go back to our system here, it takes a while for this to update. But if we look at hosts here, we see that the first host is starting to get assimilated here into it. We still don't know the total memory and raw capacity and so on. So it takes a little while for this to get these to be added to our orchestration. We can also, for any time here, go in and see orc ps, and it will see, okay, so the manager and the monitor for N1 is actually already a part of our cluster. If we run it again, we might see more services. So it takes a little while for them to be added into the. There we go. All the hosts are now in the web in Ceph and using CephAdmin, and we can see all the data about them. We see that we have 6 different services on 3 different hosts. We see that they are running on virtual machine in VirtualBox. It's 1 CPU, 1 core. Total memory is 4 gigabytes. I try to do this as I usually do, set up a cluster with 2 gigabytes per host, but it didn't really work with the added complexity of Podman and using containers. So you need a little bit more memory. So that is one thing that you need to have in mind, that when you're running this system, it will require more memory and you get less memory to the actual service. And then we have the raw capacity. I have 50 gigabytes of data disks and then 20 gigabytes of system disk. We have 2 drives and 1 NIC. And we don't have any flash. So I could have said that these could be flash drives and so on. But yeah, so you can see what you have in your system. But we still have a bunch of services that haven't been adopted yet. So we see here we have 6 stray daemons that are not adopted yet. So let's continue our process here to adopt the last daemons. Next up we will do the OSDs. So I have 3 of them. OSD 0, we'll add that. We will add OSD1, and last but not least, OSD2. And this should also be done one at a time, because you don't want to lose any data. As this is a test cluster, I do them all in sequence. But we already see that 2 of them are up, and the 3rd one will come up as well soon. So it will fix itself, and then we will have less daemons that are stray. It takes a while for this data to update, and it takes a while for the service to actually show up here. But let's continue and do the MSDs. And the MSDs are something that you can just say, I want this many of them. So if you go in here on one host, just say orchestration, apply MSD CephFS3. So I want 3 of them. So it will schedule to add 3 of them. And then I can actually, by just looking like this, I can see how many of them are started. And now they have started 1 on each host. So everything is already up and running. So now I can go into each host here and run 2 commands. First off, stop the MSD and then remove it. So if I do that on all my hosts, I should not have any MSDs running and shouldn't have any setup or configuration for them either. So now we have 3 stray daemons. It's probably the last OSDs that haven't been added yet. But we can see that all services here are here. So it's just a matter of this. There we go. We have a totally migrated system now. I can continue running this with just the orchestration on. We can look at services. We see that we have MDSs, 3 of them. For CephFS, we have managers and so on, and they are unmanaged, they say, but they are in the system at least, and you have said which host they should be on and so on. But you could go in here and say that I want 3 monitors, and they will put them themselves on whichever host they want. If you don't want to have that control, you can say, I just want 3 managers, 3 monitors, put them wherever you want, and the system will handle that for you. The OSDs are a little bit harder because you can't really put them anywhere. You need the hardware there, so having them unmanaged might be just fine. So next up, I want to do an upgrade to this system as well, using the same procedures here. So we will go into one host, and then I will start the orchestration upgrade. I will upgrade to the latest version of Quincy that is available at the moment. So if we start that, you see that we have initialized that. We can go in and run this orchestration upgrade status. We see that it pulls down the latest image here. And I can also watch the process here by just running W, and it will show me what it's doing. Other commands you can do, if you want, you can pause it here, and then it will pause. And if you look at this, it will not be running at the moment, it will be paused. If you need to do that, or you can stop it and start it all over again. It should be fine to not stop the process whenever you need to stop it or something like that. But still, you don't really have that much control over it. You can start, stop, or just run it. So resuming works just fine. It will resume the upgrade, and we can follow along here. What it does now is pulling down the images and then put them on the different hosts. When it has pulled down all the images, it will push out new services to the different hosts and start them up with the new images. And that process works just fine, but what are you missing out on here? What is the positives and the negatives of this? The positives are, of course, that if you have hundreds of hosts that you need to manage with a lot of different hardware and so on, this process is automatic and will help you out to upgrade the Ceph version, which is really good. The problematic point I see here is if you have hundreds of hosts, you want to keep the hosts secure as well, not only Ceph. What you're doing now is just going through, pushing out more Docker images to your different hosts, but you don't really have any control of the host operating system and so on. So if you're running your own smaller cluster and just have services running in the system, when you do a system upgrade, everything will upgrade for you. So if you run an upgrade, you get the new Linux kernel, you will get the latest Ceph release and so on, and then reboot the system, you can be fairly sure that you have a pretty secure system. With this upgrade, you only upgrade the Ceph solution, so the host will still run on an older Linux kernel that might have bugs and might have different services that are not really secure anymore. So this will only help you with the first part. And if you had deployed this with Ansible, for instance, you could run the same script to upgrade all your systems and also upgrade all the services in a managed way as well. The problematic part there is when you're running CephAdmin to upgrade your Ceph, the help you get there is that it will look for each service and see that it's safe to upgrade the service. When you are running through and upgrading things, you need to keep in mind, can I actually turn this manager off now? Can I turn this monitor off now? Or is there other monitors that isn't in quorum yet, so it's not safe to upgrade? Using this way, you could have full traffic running through and you don't really need to figure out when I can turn off a service, when I can restart a service and so on. But then again, if you do this methodically and do it very slowly, you can do the same manually and get the system upgrade as well. So when you have done this upgrade, you might want to go through all the hosts anyway and do the system upgrade, and then you still need to keep in mind, could I turn this service off now, or is it not safe for the environment? So there is some pitfalls here. There is some very great benefits to doing this, but it's also not perfect, and it has failed multiple times for me during the trial and error process I had. And I have tried it with Docker, I've tried it with Podman on different configurations and so on. And this specific setup I have here with the default install with the default Podman works well. But with a different system, with a different Linux distribution, with a different pod manager or Docker environment, your results may vary. So keep that in mind. You need to do a test run before you do the migration process to CephAdmin to ensure that you have a system that could handle it and will not break the migration process, because it is a little bit fiddly. Now we see here that it actually upgraded 2 managers and deploying new manager there, and it has already upgraded all my monitors, I believe. Oh, no, it starts now. It appears to be safe to stop monitor 1. So it stopped that, upgraded monitor 1, and deploying monitor 1 on N1. And serving on, okay, a new port. And then detecting changes for devices N1, N2, 3, N2, and now it saves to do the next monitor. So what we can do now is also switch over to our Ceph environment here. We can see that it requires new telemetry opt-in here. And we can see that the upgrade is in process. We got some errors here, but those are earlier errors. It also rescales some pools and so on. And this adopting process, let's go into the telemetry configuration here and next and allow that. So we send some usage data back to the Ceph environment so they can make this process better, because the more information they have of different deployments and different configurations, the more data they have to run this. And here we see that we have degraded data redundancy. We don't see that it has put on these flags that I usually do, say that you may not migrate any data back and forth. But the stopping and starting of the OSDs seems to be pretty fast anyway. So that much data will not be migrated. But let's say, for instance, that you have some failure somewhere. It couldn't really start up the OSD again. Then you have a bunch of data that it starts to move around. You need to keep track on this so you don't have data that are misplaced, that you need to spend a lot of time to move back later on. So I would say that even though this is a fully automated process, it's not really something that you just can start and then be sure that it just runs to its end and you can go take a cup of coffee or go for lunch or something like that. You need to monitor this to ensure that you don't break your production environment. So after it has upgraded everything, it sets the required OSD release to 17 and it will deploy some new MDSs. But now all the data should be in the new format and be running in the new system. So it should be almost done with everything now. If you are running an object storage or anything like that, it will handle that as well. It's no different depending on what kind of services you run. It looks, is it safe to do this upgrade now? Yeah, it seems safe, and then it does it. So it doesn't really matter what kind of upgrades you are running. if we look at the cluster and the hosts here, we can see that everything is still running, and we have still the same amount of services here, and everything is complete. So now we have upgraded the new system to Ceph Quincy, the latest version. So in this case, everything just worked, everything was just fine, but your result may vary. So I'm not really satisfied with this yet. I think there's still work to be done. You might think that this was a very smooth migration and upgrade, and that's because I spent a couple of days to actually try this out and figure out how to run it in a smooth way. And that was what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below. I read all comments, and I really hope to see you in the next video.